we have a panel of experts here that are talking about and exploring how community, in fact, is and can be this access to money and power. And, so there's many fantastic communities represented on this panel. They are partners of the fourth floor. I did just want to make one mention about, I think a common thread throughout all of today is just the seismic shift that, is going on. It's been going on in 2020. And, the seismic shift when it comes to community, it's not just about the adoption of digital platforms or, scaling value and reach. It's also about the ways that communities are coming together and they're leveraging resources and they're collaborating in order to create real opportunities for systemic change by operating in the aggregate. This sense of a rising tide raises all ships. And so I'm about to turn over the panel. I just want to say all these communities on this panel. So we really at the fourth floor just felt this. We just lived this, in these last 6 months of all of this seismic shift, these communities just opening themselves up, all of us coming together and understanding that working together, we are stronger, and that it is something we can leverage and it can change the landscape. So I had to say that, and actually I see all the panelists are here, which is great. So I'm about to turn this over to the fantastic Kristy Wallace, who is the CEO of the Ellevate network, which you heard about earlier today with 135,000 members. And she will take it from here, introducing these fantastic panelists. Thank you, Julia, and I will hand the stage over to you, Kristy, now.
Thanks, Breen, and thanks so much to the fourth floor for having us here for this important conversation. I think when we hear about community or networking, it's often followed by a sigh. What does it mean? How do you take advantage of it? How do you really lean in to being a part of a community and accessing all of the benefits that it provides, especially access to power, access to money? We're building businesses, we're building lives, and we want to make sure we have the support we need to do that successfully. So I'm gonna cover today a host of different topics, from what is a community to how do we really make it work. We're gonna move fast. I ask you, engage in the chat, share your thoughts, connect with one another, make this part of your building a community. And if you have questions, put it in the Q&A. We wanna hear from you. We'll be asking them at the end. But now let's get to our panel today. I'm gonna ask each of our panelists a quick intro. Who are you? What do you do? But more importantly, share something about how community has helped you to access money and power. We wanna hit the ground running with true stories for inspiration to make sure that we're covering the whole spectrum of this important topic. So Jen, I see you first. Do you want to kick us off? Who are you and how has community helped you access money and power?
Hi, Christy, and thanks so much for having us, the fourth floor. I've just been listening today and it's been absolutely fabulous. My name is Jen DaSilva and I'm the president of Berlin Cameron, and I'm also the founder of She, our division that works with women-led and women-loved brands, and we help them with connections and creativity. And then I'm also the founder of an initiative called Connect for Women. And what that is we have quarterly connection challenges where we help each other connect in different ways. In the fall, we had one for young connectors where we helped young girls find their way in getting jobs. And we are having one that's based on the She session this winter and just about to do our matching now. Really, community is everything for me. I'm an only child, so I wasn't built with this big community around me. And so it's something that I've always strove to have in my life. And as I've become an executive, I think that, it's been more important than ever before to support women in every way that I can. In fact, I'm wearing all female founded goods today. It's the first time I've dressed up in a really long time. I have female founded heels on even. My husband's like, why? I want to support from the top down, and really in the network and really helping me to amplify some of the things that I'm doing, but helping to amplify women in every way that I can through my various communities.
Thanks, Jen. Chana, you want to go next?
Shout out to the only children, and I'm also an only child, so nice to know that about you, Jen. So my name is Chana Ginelle Ewing, and I am the founder and CEO of GEENIE, which is a community-centered beauty marketplace. We are connecting cause-conscious consumers to BIPOC, queer, and women-owned indie brands, to help scale those brands, to help drive more money to those brands, and enable cause-conscious consumers to find the folks that they would want to shop from. In addition to that, I'm an author of a children's book called An ABC of Equality, which introduces equality, social justice, identity concepts to the youngest of folks, but really is a tool to, like the first line is really the adults, right? So it's really an accessible tool to think about these terms, social justice, in a very simplified format. And then in terms of the other question was around like community, right? Like how community hasn't supported me recently. Well, one way that community has supported me recently is that I actually just closed my first round of funding. So that was really exciting, and that came in large part to a lot of the networks that I'm a part of. Namely, one of them is the List, which I'm an advisory board member of, and well, the person who kind of started me out on the round and why I even thought to raise money from angel investors was a List member who actually had reached out to me. So yeah, so it's very, this conversation is very timely around how to access money and power through the communities that you're a part of.
Thank you, and congrats. I'm so excited. I'm on the list, and I saw the announcement, and I know so many of us, it's virtual, so it doesn't always seem as present, but this is a time to celebrate, and I'm happy we're all here to celebrate with you. Alexis, you want to go next?
Yes, hi, I'm Alexis. I'm the founder and CEO of SheTransacts, and we specifically are a remote cooperative incubator platform and investor marketplace. And that's purely for accelerating female and minority founders globally. We believe there's a better way, a smarter way to align investors and founders to make sure they're really accessing the resources they need at the moment they need it most, while really providing a shield somewhat from a lot of the biases in the system. So we really are excited about providing a lot more data from early stage female and underrepresented communities so that we have better data that is out there in the media so that we can find better solutions. We definitely take a collaborative approach, so community is very important to how we started. We all started from other groups and came together to really create a new roadmap for founders so they didn't have to go through all the things that we had to go through and all the challenges. So we definitely have a pay it forward mentality. This is why we're all doing it. And I'm here because of the incredible female founders just 1 year ago that came together in a mastermind on a Zoom call and said, hey, we're not going to accept the way the stats are, and we're not going to accept the way the ecosystem is. We're going to come together and foster a new ecosystem from better seeds of founders that have like-minded priorities like we did.
Excellent. And Gesche, you want to bring us home? Tell us all about you and the work you're doing at Dreamers and Doers.
Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Gesche, and I am an accidental community builder. I have a background in finance, was at a hedge fund and worked at several startups. And that's what led me to start my current company and community, which is called Dreamers and Doers, because it was a community that I myself needed. And we are a private collective for entrepreneurial women that provides thought leadership opportunities, authentic connection, and intentional access for a diverse range of entrepreneurial women. And in terms of experiencing access to money and power through community, we experience it every single day. Every single corporate partner we as a community have ever worked with came through a referral from our community. Community members would proactively, without our knowledge, vouch for us and tell community corporate partners to work with us. And we've gotten so much access to powerful individuals who wanted to support us. And all of that, again, came through the community. And that's why I'm so honored and excited. I love Fourth Floor and obviously every community that's part of this panel, because I personally have experienced what is possible, how many doors are opened when you know the right people. And I dare to say that there's something about women communities in particular that is particularly powerful that I've not seen for male communities. Actually, a lot of male partners from our community members regularly comment that they wish something like that would exist for them as well.
Chana, we've been talking a lot here about community, and I would love it if you would shed some light or in some context on what exactly is community. There's social media, there's events, there's communities like we're building, and how do you define community?
Yeah, thank you, Christy. So I would say that social media and social media networks are often conflated with communities. And the core difference there is like social networks are around it's around connecting to networks, right? So and making networks visible. So your current network, maybe that's a business network, like LinkedIn, or it's a family or college network like Facebook. It's making those networks visible and engaging with those networks, and then potentially expanding those networks, right? Whereas a community is around folks who come together around a common interest, a common goal, a common value, or a set of shared values. So, they can also have similar networks in common, but not necessarily. So you can have people who don't have any of the same shared networks, but have a similar common goal, and they are of one accord around that goal. And so because of that, it's incumbent upon the community builder, the community manager, to sort of lay the groundwork around what that looks like, and the rules for engagement, like community guidelines and moderation, and making it easier for community members, people who don't necessarily have the same social networks, right? People who don't necessarily know each other, but have the safety and possibility of getting to know each other because they have a shared interest.
I love that definition, and it shows you all the potential too about building communities that are intersectional, that are diverse, that tap into many different networks to bring people together around that shared purpose and goal. But community building is really hard. And Gesche, you talked about how you're this accidental, founder, and I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way. So what are some of those fundamentals for really building a successful and a strong community?
Absolutely. I'd say it comes down to intentionality. So being clear on why is your community getting together, who is getting together, and how are they getting together. But it can vary so much. There's so many shapes and sizes. And I'm sure if we'd dive into the nitty-gritty of our communities, we'd see so many differences. So 3 tips that work for all communities. 1, to not underestimate the operations. I think like the smoother a community seems to be running, the more operations happens in the back end. So being really clear that that's a big part, and I see a lot of nodding. Then the second part is the community leader. Like that's a lot of what Chana talked about, like the difference between an audience or a following versus having a community. It's so important to have a strong leader that really cares and connects members with each other. And then in the third part, as the leader, making sure that you genuinely care about your community. Shockingly, running a community can get very isolating and lonely, and it's very hard, very emotionally draining. And I think most community leaders are highly empathetic leaders. So being sure that whatever community you lead, you genuinely care about and you're able to persevere. And I have to give another shout out to the 4th floor, because we've been lucky to do some community chats behind the scenes. They are so intentional about operations. And I'm sure most people who dialed in are dialed in for that reason, because they are just so thoughtful. So I wanted to give them a shout out. Like this event too, it's really, really impressive. And I'm in deep awe. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. Alexis, Chana had mentioned just, the cornerstone or the foundation of communities is the shared values, that shared purpose. But as communities grow, what are the ways to really ensure that purpose, the mission, the values, which makes you unique, which makes you communities living, breathing things? How do you make sure that continues to remain central to the community?
Yeah, it's absolutely such a critical thing. And I think it's why we're all here on the panel, because each one of our communities really listens. It's important you always have feedback from your community. And it's not just about telling people or repeating yourself. It's not an echo chamber. It's really to be about creating safe zones. Chana, I think you had mentioned safe zones where people have a way and a forum and structure that they can openly communicate, because communities evolve. And that's the beauty of a community, is that it's the members themselves who can shape and form, and it's a living, breathing thing. And that's when you've got a really great community, because we respond to the needs of the members. The members feel connected because they're being heard, and that just organically keeps them, involved in the community. It really is a key component, and I think it's really what puts the fire behind any community that's doing well and growing organically, is being able to really listen and hear. And, there's many ways to do that. A few tips would be having polls, having data, opening questions, sprinkling that through, whether it's in your discussion boards or even just a video from the leaders. We send out personal messages. It's not just an email. It's not just a corporation. This is a face. And now that we're all remote, we focus in the founders community especially. So we know that our founders deal with founder isolation. So seeing a video of me speaking to the community is going to be totally different from all the other emails that they get in their inbox. That's just another list or another, overwhelming option out there. So I think there's a lot of ways to encourage, cultivate, and also make it as easy as possible. Really empathize and understand your community's needs. And the best way to do that is, data and listening, and then adjusting accordingly. And it's a fun process. So I think every community here does an excellent job of that.
Thank you, Alexis. And part of, to give our listeners more context here, if you're thinking about building a community, we're giving you the fundamentals. But if you want to join communities, if you're looking for communities that can help you access power and money and the support that we all need at the various stages of our careers and lives, we're sharing some of the thinking there, what to look for, that those shared values, the foundation, the leadership. And that is an important aspect of finding your home, what's right for you. I also think it's really important to note that it doesn't have to be just one community. Tap into many. That helps to just broaden the scope to ensure that all your boxes are checked and you're really getting what you need through the relationships you're building. Central to communities is real connection, right? I mean, how many times are you, part of something that feels very one-dimensional? You're asking questions, you're not getting that response. And so communities today really focus on how do we build those connections that lead to access, money, power, wealth, opportunity. And Jen, I know you have talked in your intro about many communities that you're building. You talked about Connect 4, which I was a part of and thought was amazing. What do you think is central to ensuring that the connections are happening?
Well, Connect for Women is all built around connections. It started in a challenge to myself where I wanted to connect 4 women a day for the entire month of March of 2019. And then I thought, maybe other women would be really challenged by this, because I found that actually connecting others connected me, and that I had to make new connections then to broaden the connections with others. So, it's really centered around taking the action of making connections for each other, and now broadening that to help women in different ways. We're, now helping women to find jobs, right? In the She Session, how can we take our connections and make warm leads and connect them to people that might be a job for them? And I think that, having a community centered around an action is a nice way to gather everyone together and galvanize the community and bring us together. And I think that, connecting to each other within the community is also important. I personally try to connect with each member. Now that the community is growing bigger, it's becoming a bit more of a struggle, but I try to have a one-on-one call with each member of the community so that I can figure out who to connect them with within it, because I feel that, it's not only about the community members taking the action. It's about me living the action as well and living the mission. And, you know, if I'm not doing that, how could I possibly lead this community? So that's really important for me to do. And then also seeing them connect to each other. And that's where really for me makes it all worth it in the end. You know, when I see the magic happening and a woman providing support to another woman, a woman elevating each other in social media, a woman getting someone a job, you know, a woman out there, you know, getting someone more money than they deserve, you know, that is when I feel like this is why I'm doing it. And I feel so that like it's a sense of pride that, you know, having it all together. And I really do believe that the connections matter.
They do. Something like 70 to 80% of opportunities, if that's a board opportunity, a job, finding an advisor, finding funding, comes through your networks. So as we're talking about community as the gateway to money and power, Chana, I would appreciate it if you could shed some light on like, what does that mean? You know, it's a term we're throwing around throughout this conversation, but it can mean many different things to those of us that are participating in this conversation. And I would love to hear from you. What does this mean for you?
Yeah. So I think mostly it's around like, how can your community help you gain better resources, right? Like how does your community enable your own growth so that you're not, you know, whereas again, going back to the example of like a social network, you know, you can sort of connect to many people and have conversations with many people, but maybe it's not really there to really support your growth in a meaningful way. Whereas if you join a community, and going back to Gesche's earlier statement around intentionality, if you are intentionally being a part of a community that's like SheTransacts, or, you know, Connect for Women, or GEENIE, or Dreamers and Doers, where at the root, it's about empowering people. It's about empowering women. It's about empowering people to be their best selves. Then you can leverage that in some incredible ways to move the needle forward. And in doing so, you know, it's because you've decided to be a part of something, that means that you also are giving and nurturing and as a part of that community. That is not just a pure transaction. So, you know, if you're intentionally saying that I'm showing up and I believe in this common interest and common purpose, then you are also pouring into that community as well. And in that sort of mutual exchange, you can use that to grow your financial resources, grow your professional standing, or whatever it is your goals are. But it needs to be like a give and take and a balance.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing up it's a relationship, right? I mean, it's something you can always tap into when you need it, and moving away from this concept of it being just transactional. But Alexis, you know, to follow up on Chana's comments around community and the types of communities and how we build them, we tend to connect with homogeneous communities. You know, earlier we said people who have shared values, but it's oftentimes similar demographics, similar industries, very homogeneous. And it's important as we talk about the power of community. The power of community is also the power of exposing ourselves to different perspectives, different ideas, different connections. So how do you intentionally build a community that transcends that, you know, homogeneous nature and really truly becomes diverse and intersectional?
Yeah, it's a challenge of every leader and every group. How do we cultivate a very strong sense of what the community is about, and also be very inclusive and welcoming, and allowing all the members to feel like this is a home for them. At SheTransacts, we took a very global approach, and we looked at it from a very big level. What do we all share in terms of values? And I think other programs here, Dreamers and Doers, which I'm a member too, I love it. And there's so many other communities. Being a member of Fourth Floor, being a member of multiple communities is great. I think it actually is to your advantage when you could be a member of multiple communities, because you learn what is appropriate within each community, and you learn to be a better participant in each community because you can appreciate the nuances and differences of what each community is about, and it's more rewarding. You're not only able to help more people and expand your networks, but be able to also receive in ways that you might not have originally intended when you went there. So in terms of coming together, I think for us, we focused on principles, and the main principle that we at our community focus on is what we call HER. It's we respect everyone with humanity, empathy, and responsibility. And we found that if we distilled everything down, those principles unite us all, and we could apply that in every aspect of our lives, whether that's as a human, whether that's in our family, whether that's how we are in our social networks, and whether that's how we are in our businesses and how our businesses relate to the communities and how they impact. So for us, we take a very diverse approach, and we are trying to be as inclusive as possible, which is a continuous education and involvement, and the safe network of constantly learning. That's part of it. So it's not an easy task to do, but we hold true to those principles, and that seems to keep our community together as much as celebrate our uniquenesses and our differences.
Gesche, you mentioned earlier about the power of leaders and leaders in helping to steer communities, steer the values, the access to power, access to wealth, and even more broadly in the world. Lately, in the past couple months, we've seen more leaders taking a stand, speaking out on behalf of companies and communities to really have a voice. And so I'm interested in how you navigate those times. One, internally, how do you support your community as a leader? And then externally, how do you represent that community in creating the change and creating the conversations that we seek in this world?
It's so important thinking about the role of a community leader. And I think it's also really important to piggyback on a lot that Chana said about the differences between what a community is and what an audience is, because these days we sometimes see individuals or companies or organizations that have millions, if not multiple millions of followers, right? And that is obviously crucial, but there's something really special that happens when you can connect your quote unquote followers to each other, and what comes out of that. It's hard to do, it's emotionally draining. And Jennifer made so many great points, like very, very tangible examples of how she connects with everyone one-on-one. It's a lot of work to make it happen. And you need to be very intentional about it. There's a lot of mistakes we definitely learned over time, like what works and what doesn't work. And I put it into two categories, something that's tangible and something that's intangible. So tangible would be an example of, like, if we were still offline, like what events are we hosting where members get to meet each other? These days it would be like, what software are we using that members meet each other? And then intangible, like how do they meet? Because we all know that one and the same event aren't created the same way, one and the same community aren't. Like, how can we, in our case, we really focus, and so many of the communities here, on the authentic connection? Because the more you can show up as your true self, the more you can feel like that you have a safe space, the more thriving your community will be, the more they will trust you. So you as the leader need to find ways to gain trust and to create a space where like you can say the wrong thing, especially as we're talking about diversity. Like, it's like you will inherently on your journey of trying to be more inclusive make mistakes, but that can't be a reason to not pursue that journey. So creating that space as a leader for yourself to be able to make mistakes, admit when you've made mistakes, as well as for those in your community to have that safe space. So being able to do that both ways, and it comes down to leading by example. So the more vulnerable you can be, the more you can admit to being everything but perfect, the more it will resonate, and others can have the confidence to do the same.
I totally agree with the vulnerability aspect. This summer, I was completely overwhelmed, just had moved from New York to LA. And I was like, oh, I have a community meetup for Connect for Women. And somebody said to me as I was doing the presentation, Jen, you just look like you have it all together. And I just burst out into tears and started crying. I don't have it all together. And it was amazing, the support that rallied then thereafter, of like women coming to me like, how can I actually help you build this community? How can I know it's your side hustle. How can I contribute, take things off your plate? And now I have this amazing board of connectors who are so awesome and are doing things, because they knew it was weighing on me, and I wanted to do it so much, but right now, women supporting women, 88% of women feel that it's more important than ever to support women during this pandemic, but 67% of us feel that it's harder than ever before because we have so much weighing on us. And, I think that it's okay for us to say that. It's okay for us to show that we need help and that we may not be having a good day and that we need the support of our community, and be that way. And then people will be that way with us as well.
Well, and Jen, on that point, I imagine we have a number of entrepreneurs here, business owners who are thinking, this sounds great, but I don't have time, right? I'm trying to run a business. I'm trying to do many different things, and time is important as we are looking to scale and grow businesses. But you're so passionate about community in creating not just the connections, not just the support, but the customers to the investors. I mean, it's time that's an investment, I would say. But how do you see this? Because I know you've done so much around helping small businesses and entrepreneurs gain access to community that leads to money and power.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we started our division LLC to help female entrepreneurs because we knew that the challenges that they were up against, and we've done it in many different ways through pitch competition, giving our time away free, and we will be continuing to do that. I think it's important to invest in women and invest. And if I can't give money, from an agency standpoint, I do personally, we will give time, and we're giving back to people in that way. And, I think that, we all have so much personally on our plates right now. We're homeschooling, we're trying to work, all of this is weighing on us. But yet me taking a moment for myself, it's almost like going to the gym. And when I'm in these communities and in the moment of the communities, it makes me feel so good. The endorphins come out of it when I finish that moment. But I sometimes have to, even me, who is an extrovert, who loves networking, who loves being in the communities, I sometimes have to force myself in to have that moment and be with, the women that I care about in the many different communities that I'm in. And once you get over that hump, I mean, it really does feel good, and it's so uplifting. And I think in this time where, mental health and our sanity is that a question, it's sometimes nice to kind of push yourself to do it for yourself and for your communities.
I had to mute myself. My son is upstairs being really loud. As we're getting near the end of this panel, if you have Q&A, please put it in the Q&A box, because we want to hear from you and the burning questions you have for our panelists. But as we close it out, I wanted to hear from each of our panelists who's shared so much of themselves and their insights and passions today. What is that one piece of advice you would have for our audience? If they're looking to get a board seat, if they need an advisor, if they are looking for access to capital, if they're just thinking, how do I get started? Or how does this even work in a virtual space? What would be that one piece of advice that you would give to our audience today to help them take full access to money and power through their networks? Chana, do you want to get us started on this?
Sure. I would say we've talked a lot about leadership today. And I think the role of any leader is really to take care of themselves and do the personal work in order that they can show up in their full integrity with their community. And I think that means in today's moment that we're seeing just a global pandemic, we're seeing a ridiculous income inequality, we're seeing racial injustice, we're seeing, climate change, whatever. There's so many challenges of the hour, and we as leaders, we can't be fragile. We have to look at, where we might sit in our own privilege, and to do whatever work to be aware of our privileges, and then, look at who's not in the room, look at the work that's not being done, and surround ourselves with people who can really build a more inclusive and intersectional space, right? But I think it really starts with you doing that you doing that internal work so that you have the grit and the stamina to really do the work of the hour.
That Alexis, what would be your piece of advice?
Yeah, I would echo Chana, what you just said, coming off of one of the things that I think is so important is putting in the work, looking inside at what you need, because that's number one. You're only going to get out of a community what you put in. And you need to decide, what is it that I want to focus on? And select one of those things, put on the blinders, not ignore the world, but put on the blinders so you could really accomplish that one thing. And for us within our own community, it was learning about and working with the Bias Rehab, which is a partner for microaggressions, because we are within a community. Sometimes we don't know how we're affecting others. We don't always realize that. And there is a lot of work to be done on various levels for you to be a contributing, healthy member of a community. So I think you have to take some steps first before you really are going to receive from the community. You have to really look at yourself, examine what your needs are, what your goals are, what you can offer, and how you could be a better community member. It will organically come flooding back then, but you don't go in with the intent of receiving. You go in with the intent of bettering yourself and wanting to be a participant in the community and offer that. So I would start with, looking inward as well, especially this year.
And Gesche, what advice do you have?
Piggybacking on what Alexis said, communities are incredible, but they aren't a magic bullet. It's what you put in. What I see with a lot of our members or members in general, who are all givers, is we sometimes get overwhelmed and be like, how can I give? I've life, I've work, maybe I have kids, like all these things. And I think having confidence and comfort in finding what your superpower is, your way of giving back, and also knowing when to not give, honestly, because you can only give when you have something left to give. So being comfortable with boundaries and owning the areas that you want to contribute in. And I think that's the most harmonious and impactful way to contribute and benefit others and yourself.
Thanks. And Jen.
Sorry, that was very loud yelling from my children outside. I would say in terms of, I like to think of it as challenges for myself, and that's kind of how I become an active community member or an active community leader, right? So how can you challenge yourself to give and to get? It's a two-way street. And I think that we've all said that, but make the ask. And I know it's hard. It's put yourself out there to make those asks that are really necessary to get yourself the power and money that you need. Because the community, if you've given, the community will give back, and you don't have to be afraid to make those asks. So what's the worst that you can get? A no, but you have the power once you've made that ask.
Thanks. And I would just end by saying, start today. You know, it's a long-term investment. It is not short-term. You don't always go in and start to realize the benefits right away. So cultivate those relationships. Start today. Who's someone you haven't connected with in a while? Send them a note. Reach out to them. If you're part of communities, re-engage. Or there's some phenomenal communities on this panel today. Learn more about them. We've got She Connects and LShe, Dreamers and Doers, SheTransacts, GEENIE and Ellevate. There's so much happening in the space right now. Virtual does not hold you back. It actually opens the lines and the boundaries of so much in terms of geography, in terms of access to conversation and communities. So take advantage, take action now. This is a great investment for your business and for yourself. Thank you so much for having us here today. Thanks to the fourth floor. You are amazing. You're doing great work, and really excited to see where all of this takes us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, amazing panelists, Alexis Snelling, Chana Giselle Ewing, Gesche Haas, and Jennifer DaSilva. And special thank you to Kristy Wallace for moderating. I can totally sympathize with the only child thing. I have one of my own, and I've always worked really hard on building community around her. So that's a great point. It was really fascinating to hear all of your insights on how communities can affect change and will be effective, and how we can collectively move that needle as we embrace collaboration over competition. It is not a zero-sum game. It is in the end about the bigger voice and the access to have it be heard. So this is how we can become more powerful and create wealth for ourselves. And to Gesche's point, the intentionality, what drives the fourth floor and what is giving us strength and fueling our everyday are the connections and relationships that are being built. We're seeing founders form partnerships with each other that make their companies stronger. We're seeing startups form strategic partnerships with large enterprise businesses. We're seeing startups build out their own boards and taking on advisors that will help them grow and scale. And the advisors are collecting experience so that they can grow their board careers and eventually be more competitive on the corporate for the corporate board seats. And lastly, we're seeing investments happen, and having angels and professional investors in our community means that there's opportunity for those startups to showcase their companies and for women investors to fund that next big idea. And while we're a membership-based community, we also want to play a part in the broader society. So that's why we created Spread the Love Sheet. It's our public initiative where we ask founders to put in their dream intro wishes and the one that they believe that can take their companies to take their startups to stardom to the next level. And supporters can go in and see which kind of intros they can make and help them. And we know it's working. We're hearing from those founders. These introductions are being made, and we hope that they'll help them scale. So please go in and into the Spread the Love Sheet yourself and see what you can do and help.